Today's lesson is 1.1.1, and it is on identifying terms, factors, and coefficients. This lesson has 4 different objectives, and our first objective is that students will be able to identify all the parts of an expression. So let's start off by first going through a few different vocabulary words. So first word we have is terms. T-E-R-M-S. And terms are a number, variable, or product of a number and a variable. And we know that product means multiplication. So it's a single number, a single variable, or a number and a variable together. Each term is separated by an addition or subtraction. Addition or subtraction, kind of an abbreviated subtraction as just subtract. So let's look at an example of those. Let's say I have the expression 8x squared minus 3x plus 14. In this expression, there are 3 different terms. The first term is 8x squared. That's a number and a variable that are multiplied together. Our second term is negative 3x. Now you might look at that and think that's not negative 3x, it says minus 3x. Well, this negative symbol stays with the 3, or that minus sign stays with the 3, and over here it becomes negative 3x. Our last term is 14. You'll see that it has a addition sign in front of it, which means it's positive, so I'm going to just write positive 14. Each one of those is a term. We have the product of a number and a variable, product of a number and a variable, and then just a number. They're all separated by either addition or subtraction. Our next vocabulary word is factors. F-A-C-T-O-R-S. And factors are numbers or expressions that produce a given product. So let's look at an example of some factors. If I have 8x squared, 8x squared is the product of 8 and x squared. Another thing that we had, up above we had negative 3x as one of our terms. Well, if we separate negative 3x into its 2 separate numbers or variables, it gives us negative 3 and x. So negative 3 and x are the factors of negative 3x. Our next vocabulary term is coefficient. C-O-E-F-F-I-C-I-E-N-T. And a coefficient is a number that is being multiplied by a variable. So let's look at another example. Going back to the expression we started with, 8x squared minus 3x plus 14. Let's pull out the term 8x squared. In 8x squared, the coefficient is just the number, so it's 8. You might notice that there are two numbers in this term. We have the 8 and we have the 2. Well, that 2 is an exponent, which is actually our next word. You've all used exponents before. We're familiar with them. Exponent is different than a coefficient. So the other expression we had, or the other, one of the other terms that we had was negative 3x. The coefficient here is just negative 3. So a coefficient is the number that is being multiplied by a variable. If we had 5y, the coefficient would be 5. Our next word is exponent. And an exponent is the number of times a factor is multiplied by itself. So going back to our original expression we looked at, I have 8x squared. The exponent here is the 2. And what that 2 tells me is that x is multiplied by itself twice. In this case, x is the only thing being multiplied by itself. We are not multiplying the 8 by itself because the exponent is attached to the x and the x only. Another example would be if I had 5 to the 3rd power. That 3 is telling me that I have 5 times 5 times 5. Or in other words, I have 125. Our last vocabulary word for now is constants. C-O-N-S-T-A-N-T-S. Constants. Constants are terms that do not contain a variable. So if you take a look back to that original expression that we used, 8x squared minus 3x plus 14, there's only one thing in there that is a constant. Only one thing in here that does not have a variable. And that one thing without a variable is the 14. So my constant in this expression is 14. Basically, you can think of a constant as just a number. No variable, just the plain old number. Go ahead and copy this table down in your notes. So we have 5 columns and 6 rows. In our first row, we have the expression, and then we will list terms, factors, coefficients, exponents, and constants. So in my first column here, I'm going to start by listing my first term. And if you need to pause this to get this copied down, please do that right now. So my first term is this one right here, negative 17y cubed. My second term comes afterwards, and it's plus y squared. So since it's plus, I'm going to do positive y squared. And then we move on to a positive 4y, or plus 4y, so I'm going to write positive 4y. And then it continues on to minus 15, so let's go ahead and put negative 15 down here in the box. Now looking at this first box, negative 17y cubed, I want to list the factors of everything up in here. So my factors of negative 17y cubed are negative 17 and y cubed. My factors of y squared are 1 and y squared. Remember, there's that invisible 1 we can't see that's in front of y squared. Next, my factors of 4y are 4 and y. And then finally we have negative 15. We can keep that as negative 15, but I can also break that down to negative 5 and 3. We could break it down to the prime numbers that make up 15, or that multiply to give us negative 15. Next, let's go on to coefficients. And if you take a look back at the first or second slide, you'll be reminded that coefficients are the number that's in front of the variable. So right here, my first term, negative 17y, my coefficient is that negative 17. When you look at your second term, it's just y squared. The coefficient of this one is 1 because what we really have is 1y squared. And then finally, my last coefficient is 4. We're not going to put anything in this box because there is not a coefficient. A coefficient is the number attached to the variable or being multiplied to the variable, and we don't have a variable here, so there cannot be a coefficient. Next, we have our exponents. And in my first term, my exponent is that little 3 up there. So 3. In my second term, my exponent is the 2 for y squared. Now our third one, you might look at it and say, there's no exponent, but there really is. Just like over here, where we had a 1 as our coefficient, with 4y, we also have this little 1 that you can't see up here. So my exponent is 1. And I have no exponent with negative 15. Our final row is the constants. Constant is a number that is not attached to a variable. Well, negative 17 was attached to y, 1 was attached to y, 4 is attached to y. Finally, we have our negative 15 that is not attached to anything. So it's just negative 15. So just a reminder, our first objective was to identify all the parts of an expression. We have our expression listed here, and then I've gone through and I've identified all the parts. I identified the terms, the factors, the coefficients, the exponents, and the constants. That is something that you should be able to do as well, and we will have more practice on that in class. For now, let's move on to our second objective, which is students will be able to simplify expressions. We did something pretty similar to this last week when we were doing order of operations, but now our expressions are going to look a little bit different. So let's take a look at our first example. 2 times 3 plus x times the quantity of 1 minus 4x plus 5. So my first step here is going to be to distribute. So let's go ahead and distribute by multiplying 2 times 3 and then 2 times x. Don't forget to multiply to your second term inside the parentheses. So 2 times 3 gives me 6, 2 times x is 2x. Now I have to distribute again, x times 1, x times negative 4x. So x times 1 gives me a positive 1x, or just x. X times negative 4x is going to give me something a little bit different. It's negative 4x squared. Remember, we said that an exponent comes when you multiply something by itself. So I just did 1x and I multiplied it to another x, so I multiplied x 2 times. And that's why I have 4x squared. So x times x gave me 1, x times negative 4x gave me negative 4x squared, and then let's bring down our 5. My second step is to identify like terms. This is another thing that we had a little practice doing last week when we were solving equations. So I have 2x and 1x. Those are like terms because both of these terms contain an x in it. I also have 6, I'm going to put a box around this, and positive 5. Those are also like terms because they are both constants. They have no variable. And then we have one little loner guy right here, negative 4x squared. So let's combine these. If I combine 6 plus 5, or positive 6 and positive 5, that's going to give me 11. Next, if we combine 2x and 1x, 2x plus 1x is 3x. And then we have our loner, negative 4x squared, who's just going to come down. So what I'm left with reads as 11 plus 3x minus 4x squared. So that was step 3 right there, to combine the like terms. Now I'm ready for my final step. Step 4 is to rearrange things. It is standard for us to start with the term that has the largest exponent first. So when I look over at these 3 terms, 11, 3x, negative 4x squared, this one has the largest exponent because it has an exponent of 2. So I'm going to take that and I am going to move this term to the front. When I move it, I need to make sure I move the sign that's in front of it as well. So it will be the whole negative 4x squared. Well, next is going to come a term that has an exponent of 1, which 3x is really 3x to the power of 1. So I'm going to bring the sign, which is plus, the 3, and the x. And then finally, we're going to take this 11, and notice that it's a positive 11. So down here, when I bring it with everything else, it's going to be plus 11, since it was positive. Let's quickly just go through and identify the terms, factors, coefficient, exponents, and constants that we found here. So first, the terms. Take a second to pick out what you think the terms are. And you should have picked negative 4x squared, positive 3x,
Can I put something?
and then positive 11. So the factors I have are, for my first term, negative 4 and x squared. From my second term, I have 3 and x. And then no factors for my third term. That's a prime number. The coefficients. Take a second to pick out what you think the coefficients are. And for your coefficients, you should have negative 4 and 3 coming from the negative 4x squared and the 3x. And then finally, or almost finally, our exponents. We just have a 2. You could write the 1, you don't really need to. And now finally our constant, the number that is not with a variable. And there's only one constant in there, and that one constant is 11. So this is the first half of lesson 1.1.1. The second half, we'll be working with some algebraic expressions.